Family is supposed to be a safe haven, but sometimes it is where the most patient predators hide. They know your weaknesses and believe blood is a free pass for any crime. My mother sold my dream car to pay off my sister's $50,000 debt, convinced I would stay quiet to save face. She forgot one thing: I am no longer her obedient little girl, and this betrayal will cost them the rest of their lives. Hello to the wonderful audience of Vivian Revenge Stories. I want to sincerely thank you for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without the necessary budget to keep our operations running. If you enjoy our content, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue creating amazing stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment. My name is Julia Elliott, and I am 34 years old. I am the founder and sole owner of Ethelgard Restorations, a highly specialized private architectural restoration firm located right here in Austin, Texas. Building this company from the ground up was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. It took a decade of backbreaking labor, breathing in centuries-old toxic dust, and fighting tooth and nail for every single client in a heavily male-dominated industry. My work ethic was not born out of ambition alone. It was forged in the absolute misery of a poverty-stricken childhood. Growing up under the roof of my mother, Barbara Elliott, meant learning how to stretch a single dollar bill until it practically tore in half. It meant wearing worn-out clothes from thrift stores and listening to her constant, bitter complaints about how unfair the world was, while she did absolutely nothing to change our circumstances. So when I finally landed my first massive multi-million-dollar commercial contract restoring a historic downtown hotel, I decided it was time to physically manifest my success. I bought a silver Mercedes AMG GT Coupe. It was a breathtaking machine. The sleek, aerodynamic lines and the low, aggressive stance made it look like a predator ready to pounce. The interior was lined with hand-stitched leather, and the engine roared with a power that shook the ground. But to me, it was much more than just an expensive luxury vehicle. That car was the ultimate reward I purchased for myself. It was the physical embodiment of my financial independence and a daily reminder that I had successfully rewritten the narrative of my life. Every single time I gripped the steering wheel, it drowned out the ghosts of my poor, helpless childhood. My mother always hated that car. She hated what it represented because she had no part in acquiring it, and she could not take credit for the woman who drove it. Her simmering resentment finally boiled over on a Tuesday afternoon when she showed up at my house in Westlake Hills without any prior notice. She let herself in, radiating an aura of entitled urgency. She bypassed all normal pleasantries entirely, sitting stiffly on my living room sofa while refusing to take off her coat. "Your sister is in terrible trouble," she began, her tone demanding my immediate compliance rather than asking for my help. "Chloe needs $50,000 by Friday, and you are going to give it to her." I paused, carefully setting down my work tablet. Chloe was my younger sister, the eternal golden child who could do absolutely no wrong in my mother's eyes. While I was building a profitable, legitimate empire, Chloe was busy building a fragile house of cards on social media. "Why exactly does Chloe need $50,000, Mother?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, professional, and perfectly devoid of emotion. Barbara crossed her arms defensively, glaring at me as if I were the one in the wrong. She made some poor investment choices. She got involved with a cryptocurrency group that turned out to be a complete scam. To get into the top investment tier quickly, she borrowed money from some very unsavory individuals in the city. Loan sharks, Julia. These men are not playing games. They have threatened her physical safety. You have plenty of money sitting in your business accounts. You need to write a check right now to save your sister. I stared at the woman sitting across from me. I thought about the 90-hour work weeks I endured, the times I slept on cold concrete floors at job sites to finish projects on time, and the absolute lack of emotional or financial support I ever received from my family. "No," I replied smoothly. "I will not give her a single dime." My mother gasped loudly, genuinely shocked that her direct command was met with immediate resistance. "What did you just say to me?" "I said absolutely not," I stated clearly, leaning forward so she could see the unwavering resolve in my eyes. "I am not handing over $50,000 to clean up another one of Chloe's disastrous messes. This is not an isolated mistake. This is a deliberate lifestyle choice she has maintained for years. I have watched her finance a completely fake, luxurious reality on Instagram. She buys designer handbags she cannot afford, takes lavish vacations to Tulum on maxed-out credit cards, and portrays herself as a highly successful influencer while contributing absolutely nothing to society. She has been drowning in financial ruin since she was 21 years old, and you have enabled her every step of the way. I refuse to fund her delusions of grandeur anymore. If she borrowed money from violent criminals to play crypto investor, she can figure out how to pay them back herself." Usually, when denied what she wanted, my mother would resort to explosive theatrics. I braced myself for the loud screaming, the fake crocodile tears, and the endless guilt trips about how I was a cold, ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family the second she got a taste of wealth. But Barbara did none of those things. The silence that suddenly fell over the living room was thick, heavy, and suffocating. She stood up slowly, deliberately smoothing the fabric of her trousers. She looked down at me, and her eyes were entirely devoid of warmth or maternal affection. There was no anger, only a cold, calculating, and profound disappointment that immediately chilled me to the bone. "Family means sacrifice, Julia," she said, her voice dropping to a quiet, incredibly dangerous whisper. "When one of us is in danger, we do whatever it takes. We sacrifice for our own blood. If you choose to turn your back on us now, you will learn the hard way what it really means to be part of this family." She turned on her heel and walked out, pulling the heavy oak front door shut behind her with a sharp, resonant click that echoed through the hallway. What followed that disturbing encounter was a dead, terrifying silence that stretched on for exactly 3 weeks. In my family, silence was never a sign of peace. It was a psychological weapon. For 21 days, there were no frantic phone calls, no aggressive text messages, and no further unannounced visits. It was a complete and utter blackout. I went about my daily life, managing my restoration projects and driving my beautiful silver Mercedes, but an inescapable feeling of dread permanently settled in the pit of my stomach. The quiet was entirely unnatural. It felt precisely like the heavy, breathless stillness that falls over a city right before a catastrophic, violent hurricane tears the world apart. I foolishly believed I had won the argument and established a firm boundary. I had no idea the storm had already breached my walls. The suffocating silence that had plagued my life for the past 21 days finally broke on a Thursday morning at exactly 6:45. My phone vibrated aggressively on the wooden nightstand, shattering the uneasy peace that had settled over my house. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. When I answered the call, there was no standard greeting, no hesitation, and absolutely no warmth. There was only a voice as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "I have sold your car," Barbara stated simply, her tone completely devoid of any guilt. "It is time for you to learn how to grow up and understand what real sacrifice means." The line went completely dead. For 3 entire seconds, my brain absolutely refused to process the string of words she had just spoken. Then, a massive electric jolt of pure adrenaline shot straight through my veins. I threw off the heavy duvet, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and I sprinted down the long hallway of my Westlake Hills home. My breath caught sharply in my throat as I slammed my hand against the wall button to open the interior garage door. The heavy fireproof metal door swung open, and the bright fluorescent overhead lights instantly hummed to life. I stepped out onto the landing and my heart plummeted violently into my stomach. The spacious spot where my beautiful silver coupe usually sat was completely empty. The pristine, highly polished epoxy floor gleamed under the harsh lighting, utterly undisturbed. There were no scattered shards of shattered glass reflecting the light. There were no frantic black tire marks indicating a rushed or panicked getaway. There were absolutely no signs of forced entry or violence of any kind. The heavy exterior garage door remained perfectly intact. It was as if my prized possession, the physical symbol of my entire life's hard work, had simply evaporated into thin air. Raw, suffocating panic threatened to overwhelm my senses, but my survival instincts, honed from years of running a high-stakes construction business, immediately kicked in. I pulled out my mobile phone, my fingers flying frantically across the glass screen as I opened my comprehensive smart home security application. I pulled up the exterior camera feeds from the past 12 hours. I genuinely expected to see a highly organized crew of masked professional thieves working swiftly under the cover of darkness. Instead, the footage revealed something infinitely more terrifying. The timestamp on the security video read exactly 2:14 in the morning. A dark sedan pulled silently up to my driveway. A lone figure stepped out into the dim glow of the street lamp. It was my mother. She casually walked up to my secure front gate and punched in my private 6-digit access code without a single second of hesitation. The heavy iron gate swung open smoothly, recognizing the correct input. She walked straight to the garage, punched in another specific access code on the exterior wall keypad, and stepped inside the building. Less than 2 minutes later, my silver coupe quietly rolled out of the driveway, the taillights fading as it vanished into the pitch-black night. My mind raced frantically, trying to piece together the impossible physics of the theft. How did she manage to start the engine? Modern luxury vehicles require a highly encrypted, proprietary smart key fob to ignite the engine. My original keys were sitting exactly where I always left them, resting securely inside the small ceramic bowl on my kitchen counter. Then, a sickening realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I forced myself to trace the timeline backward, landing on a specific memory from exactly 4 weeks ago. I had been rushed to the emergency room for an unexpected appendectomy. During my 3 days of hospitalization, my mother, completely out of character, had graciously volunteered to stay at my house to take care of my dog. She had full, entirely unsupervised access to my home. She had unrestricted access to my keys. She did not just sit on my living room couch and watch television while I was bleeding in a hospital bed. She had intentionally brought a radio frequency identification scanner into my home and secretly cloned the encrypted wireless signal of my smart key fob. She had created a flawless digital duplicate of my keys right under my nose while pretending to be a caring mother. But a cloned key was only half the battle. My vehicle was equipped with a state-of-the-art global positioning system tracker that was directly linked to the manufacturer's security network. If the car was stolen, I could instantly locate it within seconds using my mobile application. I immediately opened the manufacturer tracking application on my phone, fully expecting to see a glowing red dot pinpointing its exact location somewhere in the city limits. The screen loaded, and a stark red error message popped up. It clearly stated that the tracking module had been successfully deactivated by the primary authorized user. My hands started to shake violently. I rapidly dialed the emergency support hotline for the car manufacturer. After waiting for what felt like an absolute eternity, a customer service representative finally answered the call. I frantically explained that my vehicle had been stolen from my home and demanded they reactivate the satellite tracking module immediately. "I am so sorry, ma'am," the representative said, her voice filled with polite confusion. "But you called our security hotline yesterday afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock to request a complete and permanent deactivation of all tracking services. You explicitly stated you had severe privacy concerns and you successfully verified all of your personal security questions. That is entirely impossible, I practically shouted into the receiver, pacing across the empty garage. I was in a client meeting all afternoon. I never made that phone call. You have to trace the location right now. Ma'am, we have the official audio recording of your verbal authorization. I can play it back for you right now if you would like to verify it. Play it, I demanded, pressing the phone harder against my ear. A brief few seconds of static hissed over the line, followed by a voice. My blood turned into absolute ice. It was my voice. The assertive tone, the specific Texas drawl I had developed over the years, the slight raspiness in the lower registers. It was all undeniably mine. I listened in pure, unadulterated horror as the digital version of myself calmly and clearly answered my mother's maiden name, the name of the street I grew up on, and the last 4 digits of my social security number, perfectly authorizing the immediate and permanent shutdown of the vehicle's security systems. It sounded exactly like me, but the cadence was just a tiny fraction of a second too perfect, entirely lacking the natural, subtle breath patterns of a living human being speaking live on a telephone connection. The horrific truth exploded in my mind, far more devastating than the physical theft of the car itself. Barbara had not just stolen my property. She had weaponized artificial intelligence against her own flesh and blood. She had taken the dozens of promotional and educational videos I had posted on my business Instagram account, videos where I enthusiastically explained architectural history and complex restoration techniques for hours on end, and fed that audio into a highly sophisticated voice cloning software program. She had created a flawless digital replica of my voice to easily bypass the biometric security protocols of my tracking providers. I stood completely frozen in the middle of my empty garage, the phone slipping from my trembling fingers and clattering onto the cold floor. This was absolutely not a desperate, impulsive act of a panicked mother trying to save her troubled daughter from a dangerous debt. This was a masterfully orchestrated, incredibly ruthless, high-tech crime. Barbara had spent an entire month meticulously planning this grand theft, carefully studying my security systems, cloning my digital identity, and flawlessly executing a heist to strip me of my most valuable asset. The woman who gave birth to me had fully morphed into a calculating, cold-blooded criminal mastermind, and she had executed the entire operation without a single drop of remorse. I did not shed a single tear. Crying is a biological response usually reserved for the profound loss of something you actually cherish, like a beloved family member or a deeply held memory. What I experienced in that empty garage was not grief, and it certainly was not despair. It was absolute crystallized clarity. The initial shock evaporated in a matter of seconds, instantly replaced by a cold, calculating, and highly analytical focus. My mother had just declared a technological and psychological war on me, assuming I would fold under the pressure of familial duty. She was about to find out exactly why I was so successful in the cutthroat world of commercial real estate development. I turned around, walked calmly back into my kitchen, and poured myself a glass of cold water. Then, I picked up my phone and made 2 highly specific phone calls. The first call was to Margaret Vance, one of the most ruthless and heavily feared commercial litigation attorneys in the state of Texas. Margaret did not handle petty family disputes. She handled corporate espionage, multi-million-dollar asset recovery, and hostile takeovers. I paid her a retainer of $1,000 an hour for her sharp mind, and I needed her to start building an airtight, impenetrable legal fortress around my personal and business assets immediately. The second call was to Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a senior cybercrime detective for the Texas State Police, a man I had consulted with 2 years prior when a competing architectural firm attempted to hack into my company servers. He was cynical, aggressively meticulous, and possessed a deep hatred for criminals who used modern technology to exploit innocent people. "I need your immediate assistance, Marcus," I said when he answered the line. My mother just stole my vehicle using a cloned radio frequency key fob and an artificial intelligence voice simulator to permanently disable the manufacturer tracking systems. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "That is an incredibly sophisticated setup for a domestic dispute, Julia," he replied, his tone immediately shifting into professional investigator mode. "If they disabled the primary satellite uplink, the vehicle is effectively a ghost. Professional crews usually drive them straight into a signal-blocking shipping container or an underground chop shop within the first 2 hours." "She thinks it is a ghost," I corrected him, a dark, humorless smile forming on my lips. My mother is incredibly arrogant, and arrogance always breeds fatal blind spots. I explained to Marcus that my line of work frequently required me to visit abandoned historical sites, structurally compromised buildings, and highly isolated locations across the state. Because I often parked my expensive vehicle in deeply unsavory neighborhoods for hours at a time, I had taken my own extreme, independent security measures long before my mother ever hatched her devious plan. I had purchased a standard, commercially available Bluetooth tracking beacon, commonly known as an AirTag. However, before deploying it, I had carefully pried the plastic casing apart and physically removed the tiny internal speaker. This ensured that the device would never emit an audible chiming noise to alert a potential thief that they were being actively monitored. I then paid a trusted, high-end upholstery specialist to bury this silence tracker deep inside the dense foam cushioning of the passenger seat, seamlessly stitching the leather back up so it was completely invisible to the naked eye. I opened the secondary tracking application on my phone and watched the screen load. A moment later, a bright blue dot materialized on the digital map. The ping was strong, bouncing off nearby cellular towers. "I have the live location," I told Marcus, reading the coordinates aloud. "It is not sitting in a local, rundown scrapyard, and it is definitely not at a shady used car dealership. It is currently traveling southeast on Interstate 10 at exactly 75 miles per hour. "Southeast," Marcus muttered, the sound of rapid keyboard typing echoing over the phone. "If they maintain that exact trajectory, there is only one major destination at the end of that route. They are heading straight for the Port of Houston." The Port of Houston is one of the largest and busiest maritime shipping hubs in the entire world. It is also a notorious, gaping black hole for stolen luxury goods. Once a vehicle is driven inside a steel shipping container and loaded onto a massive international freighter, it is gone forever, completely beyond the jurisdictional reach of American law enforcement. "Keep monitoring that signal," Marcus instructed sharply. "I am going to run a deep, unofficial background check on your sister. This entire operation requires a significant criminal network. If she is in debt to loan sharks for a cryptocurrency scam, I want to see the digital footprints." I spent the next 3 hours sitting at my dining room table, tracking the slow, methodical crawl of the blue dot as it navigated through heavy morning traffic toward the coastal port. Just before noon, my phone rang again. It was Marcus, and the tone of his voice was distinctly grim. "You need to brace yourself, Julia," he said slowly. I dug into Chloe's financial records, and I pulled some strings with a contact at the Financial Crimes Division. The entire story about the cryptocurrency investment and the violent loan sharks is a complete and total fabrication. There are no loan sharks threatening her physical safety. Then why does she desperately need $50,000 by Friday? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Because she is about to be indicted for a massive federal crime," Marcus revealed, laying out the horrifying truth. "Chloe does not have a gambling problem. She has an embezzlement problem. Over the last 18 months, she has systematically siphoned exactly $50,000 from the pediatric cancer charity where she works as an administrative director. She used corporate funds to finance her luxury vacations, her designer wardrobe, and her fake influencer lifestyle. The charity recently hired an external auditing firm. They discovered the massive discrepancy on Monday morning. They confronted Chloe and gave her a strict, confidential ultimatum. Silently return the stolen funds in full by the end of the business week, or they will hand the forensic accounting files over to the district attorney and press felony theft charges. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal washed over me. The pieces of the puzzle aggressively slammed into place. My mother did not engineer this heist to save her youngest daughter from violent street criminals. She orchestrated a high-tech felony to keep her precious golden child out of a federal penitentiary for stealing money intended for terminally ill children. She sold my car to a smuggling syndicate, I deduced, the mathematics of the crime perfectly aligning in my head. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Your car has a retail value of roughly $130,000. But selling a stolen luxury vehicle requires time, forged title documents, and always leaves a dangerous paper trail. Your mother did not have time. She needed completely untraceable, clean cash, and she needed it immediately. She likely brokered a desperation deal with a transnational car smuggling ring. They get a pristine, high-performance vehicle to ship off to a wealthy buyer in Dubai, and they pay your mother $50,000 in crisp, unmarked bills right on the spot. It is pennies on the dollar for them, and it solves your sister's impending criminal charges overnight. I ended the call and stared out the window of my beautiful home. The level of moral bankruptcy my own flesh and blood had just displayed was almost difficult to comprehend. They had conspired to steal the greatest symbol of my hard-earned success, violently liquidating my property just to cover up a despicable crime against a charity. They genuinely believed their digital tracks were completely invisible. They thought they had committed the perfect, untraceable crime. But they had absolutely no idea that I was already tracking their every single move, and the trap I was about to set would be far more devastating than anything they could have ever anticipated. Margaret Vance did not become the most feared attorney in Texas by acting on pure emotion or impulsive rage. When I finished explaining the situation, her legal advice was as cold and tactical as a military strike. You have the physical location of the vehicle, and you have the underlying motive, Margaret stated sharply over the secure line. But circumstantial evidence is not enough to guarantee a rock-solid, inescapable federal conviction. Right now, your mother is holding exactly $50,000 in completely untraceable, illicit currency. If she gets even a microscopic hint that you are mobilizing the authorities, she will launder that cash through a dozen different channels or bury it in a safety deposit box within 60 minutes. You have to swallow your pride, Julia. You must play the victim. You have to make them believe they have completely broken your spirit and that you have surrendered. It was the hardest assignment I had ever been given. I sat in my home, gripping my phone until my knuckles turned entirely white. I needed to deliver the performance of a lifetime. I forced myself to recall the absolute worst, most degrading moments of my poverty-stricken childhood, channeling that ancient helplessness until my chest physically ached and my breathing became shallow and ragged. When my voice was sufficiently strained, I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the fourth ring, her silence radiating pure arrogance. "Mother, I am so sorry," I sobbed into the receiver, letting my voice crack perfectly on the final syllable. "I was wrong. I was so incredibly selfish. I was just so attached to that car. But you were right. Family is the most important thing in the world. I understand why you had to do it. Please forgive me." There was a long, incredibly satisfying pause on her end. She was drinking in my manufactured misery like it was fine wine. "I am glad you have finally come to your senses, Julia," Barbara replied, her tone dripping with sickening maternal condescension. "It is just a piece of metal. Your sister's life is far more valuable than your little vanity project. We will put this ugly incident behind us. I forgive you." I hung up the phone and instantly wiped the fake tears from my face, my expression returning to stone. The trap was officially set. They felt completely invincible, and their absolute lack of remorse was immediately broadcast to the entire world. That very evening, I opened my secondary social media account and navigated to my mother's public profile. She had just uploaded a brand new album of photographs. They were dining at one of the most exclusive, ridiculously expensive five-star French steakhouses in downtown Austin. The pictures showed Barbara and Chloe clinking crystal flutes of imported champagne, surrounded by platters of fresh oysters and primed cuts of beef. Chloe was wearing a brand new designer silk dress, her fake bright white smile plastered across her face. The caption below the photo read, "Celebrating beautiful new beginnings with my youngest daughter." The power of a mother's love and forgiveness can weather absolutely any storm. Family always survives. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of the post made my stomach churn violently. They were celebrating a successful felony extortion and the evasion of federal prison by gorging themselves on a luxury dinner, financed entirely by the liquidation of my hard work. They were toasting to my destruction. I channeled that intense disgust into my next calculated move. The following afternoon, I sent them a seemingly desperate conciliatory text message, inviting them over for a private afternoon tea to officially make amends. They accepted immediately, eager to gloat and establish their dominance in my own home. Before they arrived, I carefully taped a high-fidelity, voice-activated digital audio recorder directly underneath the glass center of my living room coffee table. When Barbara and Chloe walked through my front door, they carried themselves like victorious royalty. They settled onto my expensive velvet sofa, accepting the porcelain cups of Earl Grey tea I handed them. For the first 20 minutes, I played the role of the subdued, defeated daughter perfectly. I complimented Chloe on her new dress and apologized again for my initial anger. Then, I gently guided the conversation exactly where it needed to go. "I am just genuinely confused, Mother," I said softly, looking down at my lap to hide my piercing gaze. "How did you manage to get the dealership to cancel the tracking service? Their security questions are incredibly strict. I could never figure out how you bypassed their entire technical department." Flattery is the absolute ultimate weakness of a narcissist. Barbara could not resist the overwhelming urge to showcase her superior intellect. She took a delicate sip of her tea and smiled a wicked, boastful smile. "Oh, darling, you young people think you hold a monopoly on modern technology," Barbara chuckled, completely unaware that the hidden microphone was capturing every single syllable of her confession. It was remarkably simple. I downloaded a lovely little application on my phone for just $4.99. It is designed for artificial intelligence voice modeling. You post so many of those terribly boring hour-long videos about architectural history on your business page. I just let the application listen to your voice for about 20 minutes. When I called the security hotline, I simply typed my responses into the screen, and the application spoke perfectly in your exact accent. The poor girl on the phone did not suspect a single thing. It was actually quite brilliant. "That is amazing," I lied, my heart pounding with cold triumph. "But what about the money? Was the buyer not suspicious of the paperwork?" Chloe chimed in, eager to share in the criminal glory. "The buyer did not care about paperwork, Julia. They were private exporters. They handed over $50,000 in cold, hard cash inside a heavy duffel bag. We counted every single $100 bill right there in the parking lot." "I see," I whispered. "Excuse me for just one moment. Let me fetch some fresh hot water from the kitchen." I stood up and calmly walked into the kitchen, leaving them to their arrogant giggling. Once completely out of their sight, I pulled my personal tablet from the top drawer of the counter. I had one final crucial thread to pull. 5 years ago, Chloe had purchased a new mobile device. Because she was notoriously incompetent with digital security, she had begged me to configure her cloud storage accounts and synchronize her passwords. I had used my own secondary email address as the primary emergency recovery contact, a small administrative detail she had completely forgotten about over the years. I quickly navigated to the main cloud login portal and typed in her account credentials. The system requested a 2-factor authentication code, which it immediately routed to my secondary email inbox. I bypassed her security perimeter in less than 40 seconds. Once inside her synchronized photo stream, I rapidly scrolled through the images from the past 48 hours. Criminals who are obsessed with social media can never resist documenting their own crimes. Sure enough, buried between 10 different selfies, I found exactly what I was looking for. Chloe had taken a high-resolution photograph of the open duffel bag sitting in the trunk of their rental vehicle, filled to the brim with stacks of bound currency. More importantly, she had taken a screenshot of an encrypted text message exchange with a burner number. The message from the unknown sender read, "Vehicle loaded in container number 4. Cash drop complete. Do not ever contact this number again." I highlighted the audio file from the living room, the cloud storage photographs, the screenshots of the encrypted messages, and the live satellite tracking coordinates of the shipping container at the port. I bundled every single piece of digital evidence into one heavily encrypted, password-protected folder, and I hit the send button, directly routing the entire package to Detective Marcus Thorne and Attorney Margaret Vance. I took a deep breath, smoothing out the front of my shirt. The puzzle was completely solved. The evidence was absolute, undeniable, and utterly devastating. I picked up the silver teapot, pasted a gentle, broken smile on my face, and walked back into the living room to serve my mother and sister their final, triumphant cup of tea. Exactly 42 minutes after I transmitted the highly encrypted evidence dossier to the authorities, the trap violently slammed shut. 200 miles away from the quiet comfort of my living room, the humid, salt-heavy air of the Port of Houston was suddenly shattered by the deafening, frantic wail of police sirens. Detective Thorne had worked with terrifying speed to coordinate a massive, multi-agency tactical strike force. Heavily armed units from the Texas State Police and the Federal Port Authority Customs Task Force converged on Container Yard Number 4. They moved with absolute, brutal precision. My silver coupe was mere seconds away from disappearing forever. Its front wheels were already resting securely on the heavy steel ramp, leading deep into the dark belly of a massive shipping container, manifested for immediate, untraceable export to Dubai. The strike team aggressively swarmed the loading dock. Flashbang grenades detonated with blinding, ear-splitting cracks, completely disorienting the heavily armed smuggling crew. Men scattered in absolute panic like cockroaches caught under a sudden, blinding spotlight, but there was absolutely nowhere for them to run. A tight, impenetrable perimeter of armored police cruisers had already blocked every single exit from the industrial yard. Within exactly 3 minutes, the entire criminal operation was completely neutralized. The head of the local smuggling syndicate, a notoriously slippery broker who had successfully evaded customs enforcement for over a decade, was violently slammed against the hood of a police cruiser and securely locked in heavy steel handcuffs. Criminal loyalty is an absolute myth, especially when facing the crushing weight of the federal justice system. The very moment the federal agents read him his rights and explicitly explained that he was facing 30 years in a maximum security penitentiary, the broker completely folded. He did not ask for a lawyer. He instantly offered a desperate trade. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he handed the federal agents a pristine, high-definition digital memory drive pulled straight from his hidden warehouse security servers. The footage on that drive was the final, devastating nail in the coffin. It captured crystal-clear, undeniable video of Barbara and Chloe standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of an abandoned parking lot, eagerly handing over the cloned smart key and practically drooling as they accepted the heavy duffel bag packed with exactly $50,000 in illicit, unregistered cash. My phone buzzed loudly on the sleek mahogany conference table inside the downtown law offices of Margaret Vance. It was Marcus, calling directly from the chaotic scene at the coastal docks. "We have the vehicle fully secured," he announced, his voice barely audible over the roaring, rhythmic engines of the police helicopters circling overhead. "It is completely undamaged. But far more importantly, we have the primary broker in custody, and we possess the high-definition video of the cash exchange." The landscape of this entire situation just shifted dramatically, Julia. This is no longer a simple local dispute over a stolen car. By selling your expensive property to a known international smuggling syndicate, your mother crossed a massive, heavily guarded jurisdictional line. Margaret, sitting across from me in her flawlessly tailored power suit, leaned forward and put the mobile phone on speakerphone so she could address the detective directly. "What exactly is the federal prosecutor willing to file right now?" Margaret asked sharply. "Absolutely everything," Marcus replied, without a single second of hesitation. "We are upgrading the charges entirely. This is now officially classified as federal grand theft, aggravated identity theft, for utilizing the artificial intelligence voice simulation software, and active conspiracy to engage in international illicit trafficking. The federal magistrate just finished reviewing the secret audio recordings you provided, alongside the warehouse security video. He was absolutely furious. Given that the two women are currently in physical possession of $50,000 in highly liquid, untraceable currency, he classified both of them as extreme, immediate flight risks who are highly likely to obstruct justice. He just signed emergency, no bail arrest warrants for both of them. They are not getting a slap on the wrist, and they are absolutely not getting out on bond. The line clicked dead. The storm I had been waiting for had officially made landfall. I stood up slowly from the heavy leather chair and walked toward the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of Margaret's corner office. I looked down at the sprawling, bustling city of Austin. The late afternoon sun was casting long, sharp shadows over the crawling lines of traffic hundreds of feet below. I felt incredibly light. The heavy, suffocating burden of familial obligation that had chained me down since I was a little girl had completely evaporated into the Texas air. Margaret quietly slid a thick, imposing stack of legal documents across the polished wood of her desk. It was the formal, sworn affidavit demanding full criminal prosecution to the absolute maximum extent of the law. It was the absolute point of no return. Once my signature touched that heavy parchment, the bureaucratic machine of the federal government would completely take over, and there would be absolutely no way to stop it, no matter how much they begged or pleaded. "Are you entirely certain about this next step?" Margaret asked, her usually sharp voice unusually soft, displaying a rare sliver of genuine human empathy. "Once we submit these affidavits to the federal prosecutor, you can never take it back. You will be sending your own flesh and blood to a federal penitentiary for a very long time." I did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. I picked up the heavy gold-plated fountain pen resting on her desk. I thought about the decades of emotional manipulation, the complete lack of maternal support, and the sheer, unadulterated arrogance they displayed while drinking expensive champagne paid for with my stolen livelihood. They had made their ultimate choice the moment they cloned my voice to betray me. Now, I was making mine. I pressed the sharp metal nib against the crisp white paper and signed my full legal name with quick, aggressive, and utterly permanent strokes. I capped the pen, laid it down gently, and turned back to my attorney. I had just surgically removed the toxic infection from my life, permanently cutting the final, rotting emotional tie that bound me to them. The trap was flawlessly set. The digital evidence was absolute, and now it was time to let the authorities deliver the final, crushing blow. That very same Saturday evening, my mother decided to host a magnificent catered champagne reception at her sprawling suburban estate. The sheer audacity of her actions was almost mesmerizing to witness. With $50,000 of untraceable cash secretly handed over to the charity auditors just 24 hours prior, Chloe was officially cleared of her impending embezzlement charges. To the outside world, this was just a beautiful, joyous gathering to celebrate Chloe turning a brand new page and stepping into a bright new chapter of her life. The manicured front lawn was illuminated by dozens of soft golden fairy lights. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated through the crowd of wealthy, influential country club socialites, carrying silver trays loaded with expensive crystal flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Barbara was entirely in her element, floating gracefully among her affluent friends in a stunning designer gown, wearing the absolute confidence of a woman who genuinely believed she had committed the perfect crime and emerged entirely victorious. From my vantage point parked at the end of the dark, quiet street, I watched the sickening display of fake honor and stolen prestige unfold. I waited patiently until the string quartet finished their song. I waited until Barbara walked up to the grand stone steps of the front porch, cheerfully clinking her spoon against her champagne flute to command the attention of the 70 or so guests gathered on the lawn. "Friends and family," Barbara announced, her voice projecting clearly into the warm night air. "Thank you all so much for gathering here tonight. We are here to celebrate my beautiful daughter, Chloe. Life throws incredibly difficult challenges at us, but the unwavering strength of family and the deep, unbreakable bonds of motherly love can conquer absolutely any storm. We are so immensely proud of the new path she is walking." The crowd erupted into polite, admiring applause. Chloe stood next to her, beaming with that manufactured, flawless smile. Right at that exact, triumphant moment, I reached down and turned the ignition of my vehicle. The massive, twin-turbocharged, 8-cylinder engine roared to life, shattering the polite, refined silence of the affluent neighborhood with a deafening, aggressive growl. The polite applause on the lawn instantly faltered. Heads turned sharply toward the street. I shifted the car into drive and slowly, deliberately, rolled out of the heavy shadows. My bright, piercing LED headlights cut through the darkness like sharp blades, completely illuminating the horrified, frozen faces of my mother and sister as I turned the steering wheel and parked the massive, gleaming silver coupe directly in the center of her circular driveway. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of elite guests. Barbara dropped her expensive crystal flute. It shattered against the stone steps, the champagne spilling across the expensive masonry. The blood completely drained from Chloe's face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. They stared at the car they believed was currently sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, completely unable to comprehend the impossible reality sitting right in front of them. Before a single person could utter a word, the dark street behind me exploded in a blinding storm of flashing red and blue strobe lights. The deafening, aggressive shriek of 3 police sirens tore through the neighborhood, completely drowning out the soft, classical music playing in the background. 3 heavily marked police cruisers and 2 unmarked federal tactical vehicles aggressively swarmed the driveway, their heavy tires tearing up the perfectly manicured grass as they aggressively boxed in all possible escape routes. The wealthy guests began to panic, screaming and scrambling to get out of the way as heavily armed officers spilled out of the vehicles. Detective Marcus Thorne stepped out of the lead cruiser, his face carved from absolute stone, holding a thick folder of official legal documents. He did not hesitate, and he certainly did not care about the delicate sensibilities of the high society audience watching in utter shock. He marched straight up the stone steps, completely ignoring the horrified murmurs of the country club elite. "Barbara Elliott and Chloe Elliott," Marcus announced, his booming voice echoing across the chaotic lawn. "I have emergency federal warrants for your immediate arrest. You are both being charged with federal grand theft, aggravated identity theft, and active conspiracy to traffic stolen goods across international borders." "No, wait! There has to be a massive mistake!" Barbara shrieked, her voice cracking as the carefully constructed facade of her entire life violently crumbled into dust. She instinctively backed away, but 2 uniformed officers immediately grabbed her arms, spinning her around and shoving her face first against the heavy stone pillar of her own front porch. The sharp metallic click of cold steel handcuffs snapping tightly shut around my mother's wrists was the most beautiful, satisfying sound I had ever heard in my entire life. A second officer grabbed Chloe, who was now sobbing hysterically, completely ruining her expensive makeup as they locked the heavy iron cuffs around her wrists as well. The influential friends they had spent decades trying to impress were now pulling out their phones. rapidly recording the humiliating downfall of the Elliott family. Barbara wildly thrashed against the officers, her eyes frantically searching the driveway until they locked onto me sitting safely behind the steering wheel of my recovered vehicle. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by raw, primal terror. "Julia, please!" she screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice dripping with sheer desperation as the police dragged her down the steps. "You cannot do this to us. Tell them to stop. We are your family. I am your mother. Please, Julia, have some mercy. Drop the charges." I slowly pressed the button to roll down the driver's side window. I rested my arm on the smooth leather door panel and stared directly into the wild, panicked eyes of the woman who had tried to destroy my life to protect a thief. The air was thick with tension, the flashing police lights illuminating the absolute ruin of her fake empire. "You once said sacrifice is a part of family," I said, my voice completely flat, carrying cleanly over the noise of the sirens. "Today, I am sacrificing the two of you to keep myself." I did not wait for her horrific wail of despair. I smoothly pressed the button to roll the window back up, completely sealing myself off from their toxic existence forever. I shifted the car into reverse, smoothly navigated out of the chaotic, light-filled driveway, and drove my beautiful silver car away into the quiet, peaceful night, leaving them to burn in the fire they had started themselves. Thank you so much to all of our incredible listeners for joining me on this journey today. I would love to know where you are listening to this story from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you found today's story engaging and satisfying, please consider supporting our team with just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by using the PayPal link provided in the description and pinned comment. Your generous support ensures we can pay our hardworking staff to feed their families and continue bringing you the very best stories. Thank you again, and stay safe out there.